Next on our agenda is Andrea D. Andrea is an organizational scientist who helps leaders turn culture into a competitive advantage. For over 18 years, she has worked at the intersection of neuroscience, organizational psychology, and leadership, helping executive teams build the infrastructure needed to leverage belonging and create environments where employees can grow beyond their ceiling. Andrea's data-driven strategies help organizations understand what makes people stay, speak up, and do their best, and what causes them to quietly disappear. Since her award-winning research was first published in 2022, Andrea's work has shaped global workplace initiatives and reached more than 150,000 employees across 8 industries. Andrea is going to talk about the infrastructure that turns workplace friction into your competitive advantage.
Correct here? Okay, fabulous. Thank you. Well, hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for that gorgeous introduction. I feel like a lot of the work that we've talked about today is actually completely intersected. There's so many different words, there's so many different nuances, there's so many different layers that are all coming together. Every single speaker who's been up on this stage has likely said something that somebody other said before. And it's not that it's different or not aligned. It's that the evidence is really showing that we need to look at our workplaces differently. About 11 years ago, I actually did a study on whether or not DEI would polarize or bring organizations together. The research actually showed we would polarize. And the reason for that is because we didn't have language and simplicity. We also had a lot of people that weren't included in the conversations, to the point where we have become a bit of a cancel culture. We're trying things and we get it wrong. And so what it did was it forced me to look at, well, if DEI isn't going to bring us together, what will? And belonging was actually what we started investigating. So I want to start a bit with a question here. And the question I want you to think of is, think of a team that you have been on that brought out the best in you. Not, what was right on paper. The team that lifted you up, that you actually felt incredibly smart, able to contribute, that made you perform at your best. Can all of you think of that? Think of a team like that? Now, what I'd love for you to do is share with me one word that actually brought that to life. One word. And I know a lot of you are British, so you're going to be incredibly polite. But what I'd love for you to do, I'm Canadian, so I can associate with that politeness. What I'd like for you to do is just call out that one word. So I'm going to count to 3, and everyone say the word. 1, 2, 3. What's your word? Motivation, trust. Connection, thank you. What else did I hear? Laughter. Oh, I love laughter. It's great. Environment, yeah. Empowerment, thank you. Sorry? Support. Love those words. So what did we not hear? Job requirements. What else did we not hear? Workload management. Who said that? Yeah, somebody in this audience. So my point of sharing these words with you is really that organizations right now and the Global Happiness Index, as well as the World Happiness Report, actually all came to the same conclusion. We are measuring things in organizations that are actually not important, and we're not measuring things that actually really are important. So I actually just spent 10 days walking through Poland, Belgium, and France with grade 10 students. Now, some of you might think that's a nightmare. We were actually going through Canadian history, World War I, World War II. Now, I'm not going to compare World War I and World War II to organizations, but there are elements that actually are embedded that we're now seeing in today's society. And what was fascinating to me, so we were at Cannes Museum, and you don't see the violence as the first start. You see the first element of that museum. If anyone has ever been there, you can raise your hand. No one, please go. Yes, thank you, a couple in the back. What's fascinating is it actually starts with the US, and it starts with the financial crisis. And what was fascinating to me was as this escalation went through, and I'm walking through this museum with grade 10 students, do you want to know what they were then talking about? They started talking about whether they had to enlist in war. And that made me realize that we're failing right now because we're not actually looking at the human element of belonging. And so what I want you to consider is that, now my intersection is organizational science and neuroscience. So I'm gonna geek out a little bit with you, but I'm gonna keep it really down to earth because I'm a very down to earth being. So I want you to think about the milliseconds that happen before an employee walks into your workplace. What do you think is happening in their brain? Sorry? Anxiety. What's fascinating is that the brain is constantly scanning for threat. So anxiety is really, really important that you brought that up, because a person, before they even enter work, is thinking to themselves, without even realizing they're thinking this, is this safe or not? And what's fascinating is that the brain doesn't actually stop there. So 3 seconds later, you're reading the room. You're looking at faces, you're listening for tone, you're listening for what language is actually being said. That language is incredibly important because your prefrontal cortex, which we heard about already, that's your executive function. That's the thinking, planning, creativity, all of those things that we want to bring to life. The things that the happiness index actually measured. When that is not actually engaged because the brain is so focused on protection, how much work do you think we are able to complete? Yeah, this much. The research shows that it can go down to as little as 30%. That data is actually incredibly important because when we understand that right now we are at the height of friction, we're at the height of conflict, but friction and conflict aren't actually the problem. They're not the enemy. It's that we don't have the infrastructure to actually work through friction and conflict in a way that allows us to still perform. And that's one of our biggest problems. You actually saw this in a lot of the report as well. So friction isn't the enemy. It's just where we need to build infrastructure. My research, 2022 is when we first published. I started in the mining industry. Now, kind of on purpose. That was my own direction and need. But what we found was that there are actually 5 indicators of belonging that your brain needs to feel in order for you to experience belonging. And you'll actually see a bit of the convergence happening here from all of the other speakers as well. But the first one is comfort, second, connection, contribution, psychological safety, and well-being. Now, comfort is actually it's not like, hey, let's be nice and kind. Comfort is actually about clarity. So comfort is making something that is ambiguous clear. It's also about predictability. So I want you to think about the leader who walks into the room and dysregulates the room in the moment they enter. Every single leader, every single person in this room actually, is regulating or dysregulating every space you enter. And if your brain is registering the disruption or the protection, that means you will never look to connect with people on your team to actually create trust. So if we don't start with comfort, we actually can't ease into the friction that we're experiencing. When we look at connection, connection has to do with building trust beyond transaction. What does that mean? It means that we actually have to want to know each other. We have to want to understand each other. And you want me to do the same for you. It means that we have to be in this 50-50 accountability responsibility element so that true trust and connection can be formed. Contribution. Contribution is actually what mobilizes us through friction. What I mean by that is that when we have contribution, you actually have serotonin and dopamine that's released in your brain. Now, serotonin, think about it as like your checklist of the things that you have to get done. You get something done and you go, okay, great, yay, a little bit of serotonin is released. But if you don't see evidence that what you did mattered, and it's not actually fed back to you that, hey, Sylvia, you actually did this and it led to this outcome, and that actually changed the outcome of X, contribution doesn't exist. We need evidence. The brain actually needs evidence to understand we're doing a good job. And that's actually what leads to motivation and inspiration, because it causes us to want to keep going, even in the friction when it's hard. Okay? So for the people that are opting out, for the people that have the organizations that are like, okay, just keep going, just this one last thing. And you then have employees who are like, well, you know what? I delivered that last time. I did that. Where's the proof that it mattered? They're like, I'm going to hesitate the next time you ask me to dig in and keep going. And that's the reason why. It's your brain's response. It's neuroscience. Psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is a really interesting one. It's where most organizations actually start. It's 1/5 of what your brain needs for you to actually feel belonging. What's fascinating is that we're actually doing functional MRI resonance studies right now and looking into this, and what we're finding is that the amygdala, that area of the brain that says, I can't be myself here, I can't let go, I can't focus, that goes off if there's not comfort, connection, and contribution. We can't even get to psychological safety if we don't have that first. Okay? Psychological safety is really what protects you through friction. It means that when you are willing to stand up and say something, everyone says, okay, I can do this. If we don't have that protection, and we don't have environments where that's actually created and accountable, and we're not just looking to the environment to give it to us, but we're actively participating in creating it, that psychological safety can't ever exist. So just think about that component to it. The last one, of course, is well-being. Now, well-being always makes me laugh a little bit, because we have these resilience apps, right? We have these elements of like, hey, go try this app, go meditate, go exercise. Go out on your own and come back when you're fixed. How about that? Okay? Well, that's actually not how resilience or well-being works. What's fascinating, if you look at any of the natural disaster data, it will actually show you that when we have social connection and we have people who are working on staying in health together, they get better, they are more resilient, they repair 40 to 60% faster than someone who is trying to do it on their own. But we do not have the infrastructures set up yet in workplaces to make that happen. Okay. James Cohen. So I believe Lord Layton actually cited him as well this morning. He was actually talking about social baseline theory. And in that theory, it actually shows that when people have belonging, it acts as a resource to your brain. It is not just a resource, it's a metabolic resource, which means that somebody in your organization that has belonging uses half the amount of effort that somebody in your organization who does not have belonging has to put in. Think about the inequity that actually goes into showing up at work when we don't have true well-being. Okay, that's huge. So let me just ground this, because I'm talking a lot about neuroscience. But recently I was sitting in an office and I was actually going through the belonging data with an executive team, and the CFO looked at me and he goes, okay, yeah, Andrea, this is amazing. Love this. How does it actually measure to our productivity and our production targets? And what was great about this specific manufacturing company was that they had 2 plants. They all operated the same, but one plant was high in belonging and the other plant had fractured belonging. And you can see the data here. So plant A that had strong belonging, they were at 12% turnover rate, as opposed to plant B had 28%. This data actually always makes me laugh. 82% were willing to go above and beyond in plant A that had belonging. Only 34% were willing to go above and beyond in the other plant. So when we look at those elements, we understand that those aren't actually engagement problems. They're actually infrastructure problems. And we're living through a time when we look at belonging infrastructure and happiness infrastructure, what we know is that we can measure it. Belonging and happiness are now measurable, which means it's fixable, which also means that that is your competitive advantage. Now, the one thing I will leave you with is this. Everyone in this room likely has someone that they have fractured belonging with. The one thing that could be missing right now is actually which indicator is missing in that relationship that will change the language. And if that's something interesting to you, because organizationally or personally, if there's language you're looking for, come and find me after this. We have a great panel that's going to happen next. But let's talk about that, because that's the language we're actually missing to change how people show up and the performance that we have within organizations. Thank you.